the Sunday paper, 75 Pittsburgh presses. And it was an enjoyable job, but I remember shortly after I got the job, I was told that whenever I went to Mrs. Jones's house, I wasn't to leave the paper on the front porch. I had to go around the house and leave the paper on the table on the back porch. Okay. So when I got to her house, I went around the house and I'm walking toward the back porch, and on the porch itself, I see this huge dog box. And written on a dog box was the name Killer. And I thought to myself, why would anyone name their dog Killer? That's not a nice name to give a dog. Well, I kept walking to the porch so I could put the paper on the table on the porch, and just as I'm getting real close to the porch, this dog comes out of the dog box. His dog was even bigger than the dog box. He looked at me, and I looked at him, and he started to growl, and he started to bark, and he took off right after me. Well, I turn around and I start running. Fortunately for me, this dog was tied to a 10-foot chain, and I could run 12 feet in a split second. And then I realized, I said to myself, now I know why they call that dog Killer. That's not only who he is, but that is what he is. You see, that turns out to be the key point of today's gospel reading. Now, the gospel comes out of the 17th chapter of Luke, verses 11 to 19. And often in life, we fail to realize that which is right in front of us. Sometimes the parents, sometimes siblings, we don't see the pain, the anguish, the problems in the eyes of someone else. We just miss so many visible signs, and then we can't respond accurately. Let's take a look at the first part of verse 12 of the 17th chapter of Luke. It says that as he, Jesus, was entering a village, 10 lepers met him. Now, leprosy was the flaking and scaling of the skin that covered a person's entire body. When you had leprosy, it wasn't in sections, but over a person's entire body. You could try to cover yourself, but typically your hands would be exposed, your head and your feet. And leprosy was extremely painful if you had it. And it was extremely painful to look at because you would feel so sorry for the person who had the leprosy. Now, these lepers respond to Jesus in a very interesting way. Let's take a look at the rest of verse 12, so 12b, and verse 13 of the 17th chapter of Luke. It says, as he, Jesus, was entered, there it is, they stood at a distance that day, the lepers, stood at a distance from him and raised their voices saying, Jesus, Master, have pity on us. Now, take a look at that. They stood at a distance. You see, the lepers had a very interesting code of conduct. They did this not out of reverence for Jesus, but out of this code of conduct. Leprosy was highly contagious. So if you were a leper and you're walking along and someone was approaching you, if you did not stop and stand at a distance, once they would see you and see that you had leprosy, they'd turn around and run away. The last thing they wanted was the Jesus to run away. That's why they stood at a distance. They stopped. And then they asked Jesus to have pity on them, and he does. He realizes their plight. He can hear their plea and responds accurately. Let's take a look at verse 14 and 15 again in the 17th chapter of Luke. And when he, Jesus, saw them, that's the lepers, he said, go, show yourselves to the priest. As they were going, they were cleansed. And one of them, realizing he had been healed, returned, glorifying God in a loud voice. Now, there's a very interesting thing that occurs in verse 14 and 15. 10 people have leprosy, but only one returns to give God thanks. Where are the other 9? So I ask you this question. Why did only one return to give God thanks? There's a reason for it. Why the other 9 didn't, and this one did. Take a look. It's near the bottom 3 lines of what you're going to see on the wall. Why does only one return to give thanks? Do you see it there? Let's take a look at it. And one of the lepers, realizing he had been healed. When he realized he had been healed, then he returns to give thanks to God. You know, it's hard to believe the other 9, all 10, didn't realize they were healed of leprosy because it covered your entire body. Were the other 9 ungrateful? No, they weren't ungrateful. What happened to the other 9? They didn't realize they were healed. One realizes he was healed, he returns to give thanks. The other 9 didn't. You see, that's how life works. If you don't realize how good God has been to you, you'll probably not stop to say thank you to God. If you don't realize your blessings, your assets, your gifts, all the kind generosity that God has bestowed upon you, you're not going to realize what you have. You're not going to say, thank you, God. That one leper realized he had been healed, and he went right back to God and said, thank you. The other 9, I don't know how they missed it. Their body was healed. Their pain was gone. How did they not see? But sometimes we don't realize what's right in front of us. Now, I've done a lot of counseling. Spiritual direction as a priest. Now, priests don't do marriage counseling for folks who are having marital problems, but we give spiritual direction. And usually when a couple comes to my office for spiritual direction in a troubled marriage, I kind of set the parameters of how we're going to have our meeting. I always tell them, look, you have to be open and honest with yourself and with each other. And if you do that, then we'll be able to make some progress. I remember this one day, this one couple, I will never forget them. They came into my office. I set up the parameters of the meeting. You got to be open, you got to be honest. And the wife decided to go first. And she does something very important. She began to talk directly to her husband. She was looking right at him. She decided not to speak to him through me. How often we make that mistake. How often parents make that mistake when they talk to their spouse through their kids. Find out what mom's doing after supper, instead of just looking directly at her or directly at him. This wife looked right at her husband, right in his eyes. And this is what she said. She said, I have been lonely in this marriage for 10 years. She said, the problem is this. You stopped looking at me. You stopped giving me those surprise kisses, those surprise pats on the back and other locations on me. You stopped complimenting me when I got dressed to go out somewhere. You don't even look at me despite the fact I'm standing right in front of you. And I therefore have been lonely for 10 years. And he responded by the most interesting way possible. He looked right at his wife. And you know what he said? He said, I am sorry. I never realized I stopped doing those things. Isn't that an amazing answer? He never realized it. It's not that one morning he woke up and he said to himself, this is the day I stopped doing all these things for my wife. They just slowly corroded away. Where he would just slow down the compliments, and slow down the pats, and slow down the I love you, and slow down those special little moments when you walk up to a wife or to a husband and you just give them that little extra. He just gradually stopped those things. He said, I didn't realize it. And I looked at him and I said to them, I said, wow, we have something really special here. Because the problem seems to be just that. She's been lonely and you haven't realized what you stopped doing. So all you have to do is re-engage and bring those things back. Because that's why she said yes to you when you both got married. How easy it is not to realize what's going on right in front of you. Now hopefully this isn't true for anyone here this morning. But there's a good chance it is. Because this problem is on the rise. And if this has not happened in your family, it might have happened in your circle of friends or in your community. Suicide. And if you have had a loved one commit suicide or a friend commit suicide, whenever you find out about the suicide, what is a usual response that many people give when they learn that this person committed suicide? And they share with you the pain of what that person was going through. How do many people respond? I never realized it. I never saw his hurt. I never realized she was going through that much. I never heard her pleas for cry. I never saw her pain in her eyes. I looked, but I didn't see it. I didn't realize it. You're left stunned and confused. based upon the fact that you didn't realize it. That was all. You were looking and you didn't see. Whatever your prayer is going to be for today and whatever you request of God for tonight into tomorrow, one thing you might want to ask for is, God, give me the gift of realization. Help me to see what's going on right in front of my eyes, right in the eyes and the heart and the soul of my family and my friends. Because in life we often just walk by and we don't see it. One leper says thank you to God because he realized he had been healed. The other 9 never said thank you. But they weren't not ungrateful. They just didn't realize for some reason they weren't healed. Had they realized it, all 10 would have went over to God and said thank you. How could they miss it? How could you miss a loved one who commits suicide and you said, I didn't realize that. I didn't know he or she was going through all that pain, all that trouble. How did you miss it? You failed to realize it. I didn't know why they called that dog killer. I found out. Pray for the gift of realization. It's a very, very important asset in life. We all need it. Because we all have family, we all have friends and people we deal with. And we don't see the pain in their eyes, their broken heart, their pleas of crying when they do that in a silent fashion. When we don't realize any of that, we're not going to respond as we need to. Heavenly Father, give all of us this morning and the rest of our lives the gift of realization so we can act properly and respond accordingly.